I'm Ryan Griggs.
And I'm James Nethery.
We are shooting a review of Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker.
And why us? Well, I've practiced the infinite banking concept for 14 years. I've been in the financial world as an agent advisor for over 28 years. And I've been teaching really my clients how to do this ever since I discovered the concept. And I think everyone should learn how to become your own banker.
Mm-hmm. And I was previously in the academic world. I come from an economics background, fully intended on becoming a professor of economics. I always thought that changing ideas was the way to change the world. And it occurs to me after having read Nelson's book and now having been a practitioner for some time that the real way to do it is to return the banking function back to the individual.
That's exactly what Nelson teaches, is how to perform the banking function, literally how you can become your own banker.
We hope you enjoy it.
You know, banking is the most important business in the world. And if you consider what, banking is, it's just the movement of money, loans, withdrawals, deposits, loan repayments. Mm-hmm. Money has to flow, all right? So banking is the movement of money. Money has to flow just like blood has to flow, water has to flow, and knowledge must also flow. If you think about money, really there's only one pool of money in the world, only one, and it has to flow, right? There's only one pool of water in the world. There's only one pool of money in the world. Money must flow, water must flow. The question is, how much of that pool of money do you control as it relates to you and your needs?
Mm-hmm. And that's really, it is a book about money. It's about more than money. It's about finance, but to hone in on what we can do to make ourselves better off in the world of money, Nelson does zoom in on, focus on banking. That's why the title is Becoming Your Own Banker. And a lot of people will get confused about what we mean by banking. They'll think of a checking account or a savings account. And just like you said, Nelson's referring to the movement of money, the flow of money. And it's a different way of thinking about finance. It's a different way of thinking about personal prosperity, about wealth in general. So it is a paradigm shift, and it is important that the reader sort of situate themselves in that different way of thinking and start thinking about money and its flow, rather than what you might hear in the typical financial world. And just like you say, the idea is to put yourself in control of that flow. How much of the flow of money do you control as it relates to your needs? And as we'll see later, and as Nelson starts to allude to, the problem is that we've abdicated the responsibility over controlling the flow of money as it relates to our needs, as it relates to our finances.
I like that. We've since we've abdicated our responsibility to perform the banking function in our life, someone else will perform that function, mm-hmm. and they will profit, right? So because we've abdicated our responsibility, we've also abdicated or lost or given away the profits and the control. Very, control is sometimes worth more than returns. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, look, Nelson himself tells his story in the first part of the book, and he does a great job. The bottom line, though, he was a very successful real estate investor. He was at the time accustomed to paying 9 and 9.5% interest, using other people's money for his real estate deals. But in 1980, real estate, was very profitable. But also in 1980, interest rates went to 23%, actually 21.5% prime. He wasn't prime. I'm not prime. You're probably not prime either. So we have to pay 1.5 points over, 23% interest. And there he was caught owing $500,000 at 23% interest. Now, $500,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money today to some people. But in today's dollars, That's the equivalent of $1.5 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? $1.5 million paying 23%. That's about $115,000 a year in interest alone that he was paying at that time. Right. Today's dollars, that's about $375,000 in interest alone.
Yeah. There's a lot of big numbers there for some people. And at the bottom, at the end of the story, at the bottom line, this is a man who understands capital. Right? He understands cash flow and was right in the thick of it in a time when, throughout the history of the country, when interest rates were at some of the highest they've ever been, and quickly was acquainted with his own need for financing for cash.
And I don't want to throw big numbers out. I'm just relating the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
He owed $500,000 at 23% interest. That'll get your attention.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'm just, and literally you can move decimal points either way,
mm-hmm.
right? $375,000 equivalent in today's dollars of interest. So he was paying $115,000 in interest alone. I mean, it's a big number, and I want you to hear the effect of that. But look, at the time, his brother was a life insurance agent. He'd been accustomed to paying high premium in life insurance. He was paying at the time $18,000 a year in life insurance premiums.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you know today that pays $18,000 a year in premium?
Not enough.
Right. Well, in today's dollars, that's about $54,000 a year in life insurance premium. Okay. So, I don't personally think that he was trying to, indirectly support his brother. He's seen the value in life insurance. Okay. But there he was owing $500,000 in outstanding loans, interest rates, 23% interest. And he's seen that he had access to capital on a guaranteed contractual basis at 5% and 8%.
Mm-hmm.
So then he clearly realized he should have been paying $115,000 in life insurance premium and no more than $18,000 in interest.
Yeah. Had he been paying those higher premiums, he would have had enough access to cash to pay off his creditors.
He might not have ever even gotten into that situation
in the first place,
because he would have been able to maintain control.
I also think it's important to point out that what caused the creator of the infinite banking concept to come to the idea was hardship. And I know I've heard you say before, there's never a problem until there's a problem. And that's fully true. You could be going along depending upon third-party capital, and there's never a problem until there's a problem, until the need for cash makes itself apparent, as it did for Nelson.
Right. And that'll happen just dang near every time you're not in control.
Mm-hmm.
The banker will need more interest.
Yeah.
Right. The bank regulators will need more capital or more collateral. I think that's a great question. The infinite banking concept is so counterintuitive. It's just counterintuitive. And it's almost the exact opposite, 180 degrees of what the financial world tells us to do with money. And so it takes a little bit of an imagination to even think outside the box. Nelson says that this is an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. And I know for me, the first time I heard him say that in a 10-hour seminar, man, I accepted the prophecy, number one, no question. And I have since come to believe and understand clearly that imagination is much more important than knowledge. Mm-hmm. Much more. I think it's very important.
Yeah, when I consider what we're going to talk about throughout the course of the book, we're going to get into an example here shortly, and then see actual more direct examples using dividend-paying whole life insurance. But you have to imagine the banking system. You have to imagine the flow of money beyond just your own self, and it's not something you see. I've heard you say before that cash is flowing through you, around you all the time, and it's true. But it's not something that we see directly. You do have to imagine it. And Nelson ends that section talking about how, legislators once tried to change the definition of pi, the numerical that doesn't end, decimal point on and on forever. And of course, it's ridiculous, that you can't just legislate a change in a number like that. And his point, I think, was to illustrate that there are certain fixed relationships out in the world that you have to imagine in order to understand. And what might be valuable for why you might do that is so that you can understand how to organize your behavior in accordance with the rest of the world. But it's not, again, going back, it's not always something you can see directly. You do have to imagine it. We are dealing with fixed relationships with the nature of money, the nature of banking. And if you can imagine it, then you can hopefully, as we'll get into, control it and prosper accordingly.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me, whatsoever a man believeth in his heart, so is he. And I think it was Napoleon Hill that said, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Yeah. Imagination is very important. Banking is a business. Banking is a business. The grocery store in the book is a beautiful example of how to run a business. And if you don't know how to run a business, you won't be in business very long. And it's just an excellent model. Their startup cost of the real estate, the stock, you got to stock the store and have the hired help, provide a good service and, a clean operation. And, if it's like a family grocery store, right? If it's your family grocery store, and then he poses a question, where's your wife going to shop? She's going to shop out the front door, out the back door. And he makes a very compelling example of how destructive theft is. And he's illustrating a can of peas and the profit on a can of peas. And it's really not how much money you make on one can of peas. And at one time in my younger life, I was a stocker for a grocery supply. On one side of the store has all the non-grocery items.
Right.
That's where all the profit is.
Right.
They make about 2% on the groceries. Right. So, you may.
Well, you mentioned a couple.
I'm like, stick to the script.
You mentioned a couple important points. To understand why theft. Well, to back up, really, the grocery. A lot of people underestimate Nelson, I find, and so it's like this. The grocery store is not put in there arbitrarily. There's a point to it. He'll refer to it later. In fact, he says towards the end of the section that if you understand the grocery store, the rest is easy. Like you said, banking is a business, and businesses have, regardless of the particular industry or the product or the service, there are certain things that are true sort of at a high level across all forms of business. And Nelson's picking the grocery store for specific reasons. The individual operating the grocery store becomes both the producer and consumer of the product. Just like with money and banking, you're both going to, ideally, if you're your own banker, you're going to be the provider of your own credit and the consumer of that credit. Certain things follow from identifying that fact. He illustrates the example of, you started to talk about theft and the damage that theft can do. And it's really, again, beyond just what you can see. Someone would think that if Nelson uses the example of the can of peas, if you steal a can of peas, what you see is that can of peas is gone. And you might just think that the individual is just stealing a can of peas. And of course, in some sense, that's true. But, we had just talked about imagination. And if you can see beyond that, then you'll come to see that what really is happening is that the business owner is losing 17 times, 18 times the turnover of that one can of peas. In other words, just to break even after the theft, he'll have to sell that one can of peas another 17, 18 times. Just to get back to where he was, right? So the idea of theft is sort of underlined by this idea of velocity, of turnover of the capital in a business. And later on, we'll talk about loans and credit and the problem of being a dishonest banker or failing to repay your loans. And I think what Nelson wants the reader to see, what is vital to see, is that if you take out a loan and you don't pay it back, it's not just that you're failing to repay that sum of money. There's the hidden cost of all of the interest that you could have achieved otherwise. And so if you don't pay a loan back with interest, if you don't practice honest banking, or if the grocer doesn't practice an honest grocery business, then the business will fail. You'll kill the banking business just like the grocer will kill the grocery business.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think the problem that Nelson clearly identifies as a perpetual loss of money by the All-American family through the course of their lifetime. And I mean, it's staggering in that there is actually a way to take control, to correct that, and take control of the banking function in their life. He clearly demonstrates 34.5 cents out of every dollar that's going through their hands is going right through their hands to the third-party lender. I think he's being very generous. He illustrates also there that the average savings rate, or he's assuming or illustrating a savings rate of 10%, which I think the average savings rate in America today is well below 3%.
Yeah, right around 2 maybe. And, the big focus in the financial world and the investment advising, financial advising world is that, we're always concerned about the rate of return on our savings. So while we're losing 34.5 cents of every dollar that we earn, we're concerned about gaining a small percentage on the little bitty 10% that we may or may not actually be saving.
Right.
No wonder the middle class stays the middle class and the people with the money stay the people with the money. It's as if our eye's not on the ball. We're distracted by what we're told is something we should something we should be concerned about, something that we should be worried about, that rate of return on our savings, when in fact, though, we are losing so much more than we're gaining on average. And that might come off as something new, maybe something that you've never heard before, but I know one really great illustration, and Nelson does mention this in this section, is the housing example with the mortgage.
Oh, yeah.
If you just look at an amortization table and see how much money is going to the lender just in the finance charging, just in the interest alone, and then consider that that's all the interest payment is weighted to the front of the term.
Heavily,
right? Yeah. So most of the money you're paying is going right into the lender's pocket. And most people will turn over, they'll move, they'll buy another house, sell theirs within 5 years. And so just with the housing alone, I think the Nelson number uses is somewhere in the 80s. It's let's say 85%. 85% of what the average individual pays out will go right to the lender in the form of profit. And so expand that out to all the other things that we finance: educations, vacations, transportation, you name it.
And then whenever they refinance, if we refinance, do a cash refinance, move, whatever it is, that interest becomes perpetual.
Yeah. We'll do it again and again and again.
Yeah. Over and over and over and over again.
Well, Nelson, he uses the numbers, and the numbers are there. There's a nice graph you can tell just exactly what he's talking about. But he also uses an example that maybe can get the message across a little easier. And that's with airplanes and the environment through which an airplane might fly and how fast. And I've heard you talk about that before. Maybe you want to tell them about it.
Sure. Nelson is an aviator. He's a pilot, so he uses an airplane as an analogy and it's just a great illustration. So he takes an airplane flying north out of Birmingham, headed towards Chicago at 100 miles an hour, right? Well, he's flying into a headwind of 345 miles an hour. So you think about that, 34.5 cents out of every dollar is flying away, right? Going right through our hands. And then we're trying to earn 10% or more on the little bit that's left over of the savings, right? So the airplane flying at 100 miles an hour just represents that 10%. The headwind at 345 miles an hour represents the 34.5 cents out of every dollar going away. So from Birmingham to Chicago, the airplane driver's going to Cuba at 245 miles an hour. Yeah. Right? And the best thing that the airplane driver could do is land.
Mm-hmm.
Let the air mass move over, right? Or he could take off and get a tailwind, right? That's 345 miles an hour, and he's flying at 100 miles. He's going to get to Chicago at 445 miles an hour in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the financial world doesn't really consider, and most people don't understand, that you can actually control the environment in which your money flows through.
Now, the airplane pilot has to wait. Like you say, you have to land. You have to wait for the air to be moving in the right direction. But with money, you can actually control the environment in which you're flying, in which you're participating in the broader economy. And he does mention there as well that in finance, everything is compared to what everybody else is doing.
Right.
And so if you're flying forward at 445 miles an hour and everybody else is flying backward at 245, you're getting where you're going much faster than they're getting where they want to go.
That's a 690 mile an hour difference between you and what everybody else is doing, even though they think they're doing the right thing.
Right. All because you chose to fly in the proper environment.
That's right. Natural law.
Yeah, most people would think, if we're talking about becoming your own banker, well, then you better go sign up for a charter and get comfortable because it's going to be a while.
Waiting in line for the commissioner.
Yeah. Maybe make some side payments to
under the table,
the public servants. Yeah. And he walks through everything that would entail. You have to get all sorts of capital, meet all these various regulations. And, it's important to understand that that's really not what we're talking about. To become your own banker, to take control of the flow of money in your life, you don't actually have to start a real bank. That's not what we're talking about. And so oftentimes when people talk about becoming your own banker, they use the scare quotes, because we are just talking about the idea of controlling the flow of money through your life. And he does propose an entity that you might use to do it.
He also talks about the First National Bank of Midland, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, banking is the most important business in the world. Banking is the most profitable business in the world. Do you think about that? And he talks about, he tells the story of the First National Bank, Midland, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
the most profitable business in the world, right? The most important business. They had a very successful bank in Midland, Texas, until they started practicing less than honest banking. The directors taking out all the loans, not paying them back. Then, the depositors, they get a little scary and they're to run on the bank and it collapses. They ruined a very good bank.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Absolutely not. We don't have to. And why would you even want to start a bank in the traditional sense? There's a much easier way. And it's with the use of a dividend-paying life insurance policy issued by a mutual company.
Mm-hmm.
It has all the characteristics that are required to get into the banking business.
Yeah, and there's a couple pieces there that you might remember from the grocery store example. Nelson is again setting up all of the initial startup costs associated with getting into a particular business. This time in the banking business. All of the, both in terms of the time and the money and the other people, the services that need to be provided to make for a good banking entity. And so that as we'll see later as well, that's going to be a piece of starting your own banking operation, because when you go to control money as it flows through your life as well. And then you mentioned theft as well. And the directors, the owners of the bank, the people who were in control of the bank were stealing by not repaying loans. Very similar. I'll just point out for the viewer, for the reader, that that's the same thing as stealing the can of peas, as shopping at your own grocery store and stealing the can of peas. Eventually, you will drive your business into the ground, which is exactly what happened with First National. And then you mentioned the use of the dividend-paying whole life insurance policy. And in the next section, Nelson will get into it, but he gives the reader a sort of example, a way to think about how we can talk about banking and life insurance at the same time. It might seem kind of weird. Why would we use life insurance to take control of the banking function in our life? And Nelson points out that this idea of co-generation, of using a certain kind of business or process that has one purpose for another purpose. He uses the example of the paper mill.
Right.
How many paper mills are there out there that aren't also generating their own electricity? So if you think about it, just because a certain contract, a certain financial instrument has been used in one sense for one purpose, doesn't always mean that that's the only purpose it can fulfill.
Very good. I don't think I can add anything to that. I don't think I should add anything to that, other than the paper mill is a good story too, because when's the last time you drove by a paper mill?
I don't know.
Right. So, a paper mill, look, they make paper, right? You make paper out of wood. Wood comes from trees. Trees come with bark. Bark messes up paper. They got to strip the bark off the tree to make the paper. Well, that's a lot of bark. So every paper mill of any size has a cogeneration plant. They burn the bark, right? Create electricity, sell it back to the electric company.
Yeah.
Back to the insurance company.
I don't know why that story is funny.
It is. And all you have to do is, if you understand what's going on with these insurance plans, then all you have to do is tap into the system.
Mm-hmm.
The every characteristic required to get into the banking business exists in properly structured dividend-paying life insurance. Well, look, there is a 100% chance of mortality. There's only 2 people that got out of this world alive, and it's the third one's not going to be you or me, right? So we're all going to die. But to offset the risk of premature death, dying too soon, we pay premiums, right, for a death benefit, and so we offset that risk of premature death to the life insurance company. So we just pay a premium over our lifetime. And when we die, if we die prematurely or when we die, the death benefit comes in. So I didn't have to save up a bunch of money, to leave to my family when I did die.
And Nelson kind of explains, the purpose of this section really to acquaint the reader with the construction of a policy from the company's perspective. And there's a lot of detail in there. We're not going to get through all of that detail right here.
Yeah, no question.
You really should read the whole thing, but read that section in particular has a lot of detail about how these policies are designed. But
what section of the book should they skip?
I said that's why you should read the whole book.
Okay, sorry.
But you do give I have heard you give a good overview, and I know Nelson, this is usually a pretty comical part of the seminar, but he does give an overview of how these policies make it from historical statistics to actual private property life insurance policy.
Like an abstract idea in somebody's mind into a real life
into a real
we
thing.
Can touch.
Yep.
You get a bunch of actuaries together, professional bean counters. They build these policies, and they're actuarially sound. They take the data, the historical data of how many people die and at what age do they die. Right? They take this data and statistical information because they got to price it. Right? They give all this information to the lawyers. They create a contract out of it. A life insurance policy is a contract. And it's a unilateral contract, though, right? You can change very few things about it. The insurance company can't change anything about it. Bindstraws, very, very important. A unilateral contract. Like I said, you can change who's the owner, who's the beneficiary. You can change some things, but the life insurance company cannot.
Yeah.
And the basis of our society is free contract. Contract is important, in my opinion.
Well, I will say too, when I first read the book years ago, I kind of skipped over that idea that it's a unilateral contract. It's like, I didn't really know what that meant, but it's a technical legal term, and it means that if you do certain things as prescribed in the contract, the company must follow through on what they promised to do. And a big part of becoming your own banker, why you'd want to in the first place, is to regain that control. To have that binding authority over what other entities, over what other parties have to do. So that's a crucial detail can seem like a small detail, like it did to me, but it matters in terms of taking control of the of the banking function in your life.
Whenever you pay money and premium to a life insurance company, they have to put that money to work to meet the future obligations of the contract, which is a future death benefit or a future cash value. And not to be overly technical, but there are a lot of different types of life insurance out in the big wide world. We're specifically talking about dividend paying whole life insurance issued by a mutual company.
Mm-hmm. It's important to point out that there are different kinds of life insurance out there. Most people may not even be aware that there's a lot of different kinds of life insurance. There's term, which a lot of people are familiar with. You only pay premium for a limited term, 10, 20, 30 years, that kind of thing. It is important to point out that we're talking about dividend paying whole life insurance that will pay a death benefit. It will last for your whole life, regardless of when you actually do pass. And it is, unlike term, does build cash value. So there's certain, it's important that you use dividend paying whole life rather than another type of product.
I agree. As I said a minute ago, the company has to put the premium dollars to work to meet the future obligations of the contract, which is the death benefit and the future guaranteed cash values. The life insurance companies are very limited on where they can put that money. Right? They cannot put the money into the stock market. They have to put the money to work in very conservative investments and returns, which limits them, right, to bonds, corporate bonds, government bonds, high-grade corporate bonds of varying durations, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year bonds. And then they put it into high-grade corporate real estate. 20% down, high-grade corporate real estate. So they're almost guaranteed returns.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you say, the life insurance company is so limited as to who they will lend to, but a unique benefit of being a policy owner of a whole life insurance policy from a mutual company is actually that the individual has the right to borrow from the company him or herself. And so the policy owner, is a potential place for the insurance company to allocate the money it receives through premium. And that's kind of, as we'll see, the sort of the core basis as we'll see, that's sort of the core basis as to why the individual can run their cash flow through a dividend paying whole life, is because you do have, as a policy owner, the first right of access to money collected by the insurance company.
The money that's available to lend by the insurance company, the owner of the policy has a contractual right to that amount. And he outranks everybody else.
Yeah. And when we think, well, how much can you borrow? How much can you get access to? Is really a function of how much cash value you have in your policy. People are familiar with the idea of equity. You can borrow against the equity in almost anything. The most common example is probably a house. You're familiar with a HELOC or something like this, where you get access to funds from a mortgage lender, where you can borrow as much equity as you have in the mortgage, in the house. And just the same principle stands with dividend paying whole life. As you pay in premiums, you build equity, what the life insurance company calls cash value or cash surrender value, and you can borrow against it, just like in the same sort of way that you can with a house. I think it's important that people realize that the similarity kind of ends there. There is equity, just like in housing, there's equity in life insurance. But when you borrow from a life insurance company, the terms are so incomparably better. The borrower, the individual policy owner, has control over that loan to an extent that you just don't find in any other sort of financial transaction.
Right.
And the reason is because if you think about it, the underlying collateral is guaranteed by the issuer. So like if with housing, the mortgage lender can't control the value of your house. And so they have to take precautions with how much money they'll lend you. If you don't repay and the value of the house falls, then they may not be able to make up their losses. But with life insurance, they can guarantee the underlying collateral. That policy is something that they've issued, and they've guaranteed what the cash value will be. So it's not magic. It's not a mystery. It's,
life insurance companies do not make bad loans. They do not make bad loans. You can only borrow against what you have put in there and what it has accumulated to. That's a 100% collateralized loan. So let's say you collateralize your cash value, you have cash in your hand. The cash values are still going to increase, assuming that you're still paying a dividend, or assuming that you're still paying a premium and the policy is still earning a dividend. Now think about this. So even if you don't have a loan repayment, and I'm not proposing that, we should all be honest bankers. If you make a loan, you should have a loan repayment. You can't get a loan anywhere without a loan repayment.
Right.
Right? Okay. It's 100% collateralized. Right? Well, even the outstanding compounding loan, if you didn't make a loan repayment, it's going to grow. It's going to compound. Well, the death benefit is compounding too. So the death benefit collateralizes the outstanding loan, which is 100% collateralized by your cash value. It's not magic. It's just simple third grade math. I think that is one of the most common questions that we hear. And of course not. The money, the cash value remains in the policy, and it's compounding and increasing dividends and interest tax deferred. There's a ever increasing tax deferred accumulation of interest and dividends. Now, why would you ever want to interrupt that compounding accumulation? You wouldn't. And of course not. That's the power of the infinite banking concept, is you build this machine, a dividend paying life insurance policy structured correctly, that'll earn interest and dividends forever. And then you have the guaranteed contractual right to collateralize that on demand from the insurance company. Your cash values are compounding forever. Forever. That's a long time. And then you have complete control of that loan and loan repayment. Right? You can tell them if you're going to pay it back, when you're going to pay it back, how you're going to pay it back. I'm going to skip 5 payments. I might not. I may. I'm going to do what I want to. Thank you. Your money is compounding. That's very powerful. Most people jump smooth over that. Why would I pay interest to borrow my own money? And that question, although it's a valid question if it's sincere, when it's not sincere, it's just based on pure ignorance and the arrival syndrome that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I think if the viewer or reader will compare the nature of the collateral that you just described to other types of collateral out there in the financial world, you will find no better. Again, because the company issuing it has guaranteed it, all of the features that you just mentioned can't be mimicked in a mortgage or any other kind of debt instrument available to the individual.
You can get mad and walk away though, right? If I've got money in the cash value, you mentioned the word earlier, cash surrender value. That's what I would walk away with if I got mad and quit. Cash surrender value. I'm walking away with the cash value, but I'm surrendering the policy, right? Company says, thank you. No more death benefit. I've got my cash. I'm mad. I'm walking away. And now I'm walking away and I'm looking for some place to put that money that'll compound interest and dividends, tax deferred, accessible, tax free forever. And then I'm going to be sorely disappointed because I won't find it.
And you say tax deferred. I think it's important to point out that, tax deferred is only different than tax free because, tax deferred means you pay tax when you sell it.
Later.
But if you don't sell the contract, if you don't surrender the contract, then tax deferred sort of functions as tax free.
Well, yeah, it's tax deferred though. It's tax deferred. Tax free is tax free. I can access that tax deferred capital on a tax free basis. And then of course, you don't want to get mad and quit. You don't want to walk away. You want that death benefit to be paid. That's vitally important. The contract must remain in force for that money to be accessible tax-free. It's not a big deal at all. You wouldn't want to end that contract unless you died. then it's okay to end, right? Because then your people get all the death benefit,
Right.
or whomever you love and care about, which I think Nelson mentions this somewhere in the book, not this section, but the next section. Now you think about the people that understand this concept and practice this, right? These people have loved ones that they care about and love. And what other kind of person do you want to do business with?
This is a common question. Why is it that I get to have guaranteed growth in cash value every year? What's causing that growth? I tell people that it's both, you have both a sort of a mathematical and a legal guarantee. So if you consider the cash value is the difference between the death benefit and all the premiums you've yet to pay, both discounted to the present. So if you continue to pay premiums, your cash value, which is the difference between the death benefit and the premiums you've yet to pay, must increase. And so really at some level, it's an accounting identity. As you pay premiums, your cash value will go up. Now in practice, the thing that causes the cash value to rise are dividends and interest, but mostly the dividends. See, an insurance company at the beginning of the year will look at how much money they have, what they can invest in. They'll overestimate their expenses and they'll underestimate their projected investment performance, such that by the end of the year, the insurance company has this surplus. They've been able to receive more than they've paid out. And because policy owners are company owners with the mutual insurance company, the company owner, again, the policy owner, gets to participate in that surplus financial performance. And they do that through the receipt of a dividend. So the company will pay a dividend to the policy owner. And the individual has full control over what to do with that dividend.
Yes.
Now, if you're practicing the infinite banking concept, if you want to see the cash value grow as much as it can over the life of the policy, then you take that dividend and put it right back into the cash value through a premium payment called a paid up additions premium payment. And so that's really a lot of what causes the cash value to continue to increase. And people will ask, I got this question the other day, is there a guaranteed interest rate growth in the cash value? And, nothing can be guaranteed in the future, and the interest rate will be what they'll be. But an important feature here is that the individual's behavior is what will determine the growth of the policy over time. And that, again, is a lot of power, a lot of control that the individual has over the financial value that they control in their lifetime.
What causes a growth in the cash value of a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy? The actuaries overbuild the policies, like you said, overestimate their expenses, underestimate the portfolio returns of the company and the loan performance. And at that time, the end is, a surplus that's paid out as a dividend. There are really two components, right? There's a guaranteed cash value, right? There's a guaranteed interest rate to that, a minimum anyway, and it goes up, right? And then the dividends, a surplus. There are only two types of life insurance companies in the world. There are stock companies and mutual companies. The owners of each company get the profits, if any, of the company. And that's Economics 101. Right, well, who owns a stock company? The shareholders own the stock company. It's a stock company. They issued shares of stock, right? And that's really how they raise capital. So the owner of a stock company, he gets the profits of the company through dividends or a stock appreciation. The value of the stock goes up and he sells it later. Well, who owns the mutual company? It's the policyholders that own the mutual company. So the dividend, which represents the experience of the company for that year, is paid to the owners of the company, and it's paid in the form of a dividend. And we've talked about dividends before, how they're classified. Oh, it's a return of premium. So it's in
fact, we're going to talk about it some more too.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait till later then. But then you also mentioned the dividend options, right? I can take the dividend in cash. I can leave the dividend on deposit at the insurance company and they'll pay me interest on it. I can take the dividend to reduce the premium. And I'm only doing those things if I don't understand banking. And the most powerful thing that you can do is have the dividend be paid to the paid up additions rider straight to the cash value, increases the cash value, increases the future dividends, increases the death benefit. So we're creating this, we're really accelerating this ever increasing compounding interest and dividends accumulation.
Mm-hmm.
Look, no, a dividend from a mutual company is classified as a return of premium by the Internal Revenue Code. So therefore it's not taxable. But listen, I don't care how you classify it. Just as long as you pay me a dividend and I have a place to put it that's going to make that place better and better, pay all the dividends you want. Thank you.
Right. You can make the comparison too between a typical dividend that would be paid by a stock company.
Yeah.
If you own a share of Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola pays a dividend in a given year, then that dividend is dividend income and therefore taxable.
Right.
But in the mutual life insurance world, a dividend from a mutual life insurance company, like you said, is a return of premium. It's not taxable income. And that's why a lot of the cash value growth, that's why the cash value growth can continue to grow tax deferred.
You know, let me point out too, if I own stock in Coca-Cola, and I do not, I could take that dividend and actually I could engage a DRIP system, a direct reinvestment program. Think about this. I get a dividend from whatever stock I own. It's in the DRIP program. So I buy a fractional share of a stock, right? Whatever it is. I don't want to pick on Coca-Cola. All right. So what's the future value of that stock going to be?
Good question.
And it's always going to go up, right? No, of course not. It can go up or down. So think about this. If I received $100 dividend, round numbers, easy illustration for me, and I bought a share of $100. The share price was $100. So I got a dividend, direct reinvestment program. I bought one share of stock that's worth $100. And if the stock went down to 50, I lost 50% of my dividend because I lost 50% of that stock. Once you receive a dividend from a life insurance company and it's put into the paid up additions rider, it cannot go down in value forever.
Yeah, pretty powerful. And we do mention that paid up additions rider. That's just a second form of premium. You know, you've got the regular premium you'll be paying on whatever basis, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, whatever it is. And then you've got that second form of premium payment called a paid up additions rider. And that's the way that you can put your dividend back into the policy and have that guaranteed value that will increase over time. As part one begins to wind down, Nelson mentions that one of what he says is one of his original insights, and that's that your need for finance is much greater than your need for death benefit during your lifetime. And it's absolutely true. He'll give an example of somebody who is borrowing money to pay for the purchase of a vehicle. Really, it could be anything, but he talks about a vehicle here. The question is, where does the lender, the auto lender, get the money that they're lending you in the first place? They're buying it from insurance companies. And so the typical average individual on the street who's paying the minimum possible premium payment for the highest amount of death benefit possible is turning right back around and borrowing money from a third-party lender, the auto lender, when he could be borrowing that money directly from the insurance company. And if he did it, and if he paid that money back at the market rate of interest, he would keep for himself the proceeds that otherwise would have went to the finance company. It's like when you have the appropriate comparison, when you're talking about dividend paying whole life and becoming your own banker, and you compare it to what the average individual is really doing out there, borrowing money to pay for the various things you need, you really, and you read how Nelson writes it, it becomes so clear that you could be collecting everything that the third party lender otherwise would be. And you could be doing it in such a way that the proceeds you collect can then grow on a tax deferred basis for the rest of your life. I mean, is that powerful or what?
No. You're paying interest to the insurance company to use their money. That is not your money that you are borrowing. Your money is in the policy, earning interest and dividends, accumulating and compounding forever on a tax-deferred basis. You're collateralizing that. So you're therefore not interrupting the compounding. You're using the insurance company's money. And if you don't pay them interest, you're violating some fundamental economic laws and practicing dishonest banking. As a matter of fact, not only should you pay the insurance company interest, a company that you're in ownership position of, if it's a mutual company. Now, you don't want your company to not be profitable, do you?
No.
Of course, you would want to pay the insurance company the interest, but to practice honest banking, you want to repay the loan at the market rate.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between the market rate and what the insurance company is charging you is going directly to your policy.
Yeah. And Nelson does mention it in this part of the book, and that's why we're covering it here. But we do get it a lot from potential clients, current clients even, who are wondering, why do I have to pay interest to a company to use my own money? And it is important to realize that it's not your own money, and that's actually a good thing. You wouldn't want to be taking your money from the policy, because like you said, then you're interrupting the compounding, and that's not the point. We want to collateralize. We want to be leveraging that capital, as opposed to what a lot of people do is liquidate their capital or just spend it away. So that's really the power behind the infinite banking concept. What's going to put you in control of a greater amount of financial value over time is the fact that you can borrow against it. So it's not crazy to have to pay interest on money that you borrow. That's the price of money. And it's a good thing that you're doing it.
Let me ask you, when do you borrow money at no interest?
Credit cards with a 0% APR.
Oh, I wonder why they're doing that. All right. Okay. So typically, I understand the automobile loans, the new automobile 0% financing, which is another form of discounting, right? And that limited offer from the insurance or from that limited offer from the credit card company is going to be for a specified time period, and you're going to move. That's for balance transfers, right? And if you had a big balance to transfer, the odds of you paying that off by the end of that, I mean, it can happen, but it doesn't typically. That's so profitable for the credit card companies. That's why they do it. Look, if paying interest to the insurance company, if you can't recognize or don't recognize the cost of capital, Nelson refers the reader to, because it is very common, right? So if that doesn't make sense, Nelson refers the reader to the grocery store business, an excellent model of a properly ran business, the grocery store. And if you still don't understand or get it, doesn't make sense to you, the reader, then he refers you to the story of the First National Bank of Midland, Texas, how dishonest banking ruined one of the most profitable banks in Texas at the time.
What is economic value added, and how does it relate to becoming your own banker?
You finance everything you purchase. Either you pay interest to someone else when you formally finance, or you give up interest that you could have earned otherwise when you pay cash. And there are no exceptions, and it's hard for people to see that sometimes, especially the cash buyer. God bless them.
So that's really the foundation of the idea of a cost of capital. Regardless of what you do with your money, there is a next best alternative use. You could have, if you spend the money you earn, the alternative was you could have saved it, and that money would have grown at interest. And whatever you're giving up is your cost. And that's the foundation of this idea of a cost of capital.
Yeah, there's a cost of capital, period. It exists. And your money has a cost and has a value, right? And then the economic value added, I love this. Sean Tully, Nelson references it in this section of the book. I never read that article. I never thought about that until I read this book. Right here, Sean Tully writing about it in, I think it was Fortune magazine in 1993. And he's writing about Stern Stewart. I don't remember the consulting part.
Stern Stewart and Company.
Okay, here they are consulting the Fortune 500 companies. Their accounting department and they're talking about the cost of capital, and the bean counters at the Fortune 500 company says, "Oh no, our cost doesn't have a capital." I mean, our capital doesn't have a cost.
Yeah.
I mean, just on the face of that, you think, where did the guys go to school? I mean, where did they get their degree? I don't want to, and I know we're going to cut this out. I get it. But I'm just saying, when I literally, the first time I read that, I mean, who did you learn about that when you got your master's?
Absolutely not.
No, of course not. And they're still not teaching it.
No.
Right? So people don't recognize and honor or respect their capital enough to assign a value to it. And the infinite banking concept gives the layman, the all-American average individual, right, the ability to put structure and form to their capital and value their capital. It's incredibly powerful and eye-opening. Mm-hmm. I know that digressed a little, but the interest that the insurance company charges on a loan functions as a cost of capital, right? Well, becoming your own banker allows you, like I said, to assign that value and the cost of your capital. Now, if the insurance company is going to loan me money at 5, but the banker wants to charge me 8 and jump through a bunch of hoops, why wouldn't I just pay myself 10? Because it's mine and I value my capital more than 5, and I'm not interested in the third-party lender or his hoops, right? So that's interest. I'm valuing my capital. It's premium to the insurance company, and it's capital to my pool. Mm-hmm. And I get to do it again and again and again and again and again.
So you mentioned capital, and you're going to be able to grow your capital. You can practice economic value added by becoming your own banker, because you have that loan interest payment, and that interest payment will give you that cost of capital. It's exactly right. A lot of people don't even think about capital in the first place. And most people don't have the exact definition of it down. We're told out in the financial world that the thing that you need to do in order to win with money is to go find the best investment. You need to go get the best rate of return. You need to go find this or that investment. And by the way, you're probably too busy, so you need to pay somebody else to do it for you. This is the whole idea behind the organized money management industry. And the underlying thought, and they get it from the economists, is that you have to find investment opportunity, because investment opportunity is what will attract capital, right? The idea is that if someone's got a new idea or a new invention, the people with the money will find them, or go find the people with the new ideas, and that's how the capitalist or the lender will reap the return over time. It's the idea behind buying low and selling high. But you got to go find what's valued low in order to acquire it and sell it high. What Nelson's pointing out in this book, and he does mention it explicitly, is that the reverse of that type of thinking is true.
Yep.
It is not the case that investments attract capital. Rather, capital attracts investment. And really, capital attracts all kinds of opportunity. If you build a pool of cash that you have access to and control over, opportunity will hunt you down. And that's the way to attract those optimal investment opportunities that other people don't know about. You don't have to pay somebody to go find those opportunities. You don't have to seek them out. Much easier to have those opportunities attracted to you. And when you practice becoming your own banker, you put yourself in control of a pool of capital that you own and control, so that you can decide, as those opportunities pursue you, which ones you want to take advantage of. And you'll be able to know which ones are good for you, because you know your cost of capital. If you know that your cost of capital is 5% and an investment opportunity comes your way, that after all of the risk and everything, maybe you can get 3%. Well, then you know that you're not going to take advantage of that opportunity. You'll wait for something that'll pay 8 or 10 or 15 or what have you. And this, becoming your own banker, gives you a very strict, easy way to know what your cost of capital is in order to compare it to the opportunities you see.
Very good. Well said. But you create a pool of capital, opportunity will hunt you down, will seek you out. And then I'm evaluating an opportunity, right? The capital, my money is doing very well in the life insurance policy. And I know what it's going to do. It's going to do very well there. So there better be a higher use somewhere before it ever leaves. It's like, yes, oh my
Good.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Why does someone want to have a system of policies? Well, one policy is not going to be able to accommodate your need for finance, especially over your lifetime. Look, doesn't all your income go to the bank right now?
Yep.
And how much of that bank do you own and control?
Of the well, I own and control my bank, but most
So I'm
people
talking about a brick and mortar. If I wrote you a $10,000 check today, what would you do with it?
take it to a bank.
Do you own that bank?
Nope.
Are they going to pay you any dividends?
Nope.
Did you know your bank pays dividends? Yeah.
Yes.
They just don't pay them to you because you don't own the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as that money's going to sit there on deposit until there's an opportunity, and then you're going to withdraw it from the bank and seize that opportunity, right? How much interest are they going to pay you on that money when you withdraw it?
0.
No, you could collateralize it. You could say, hey, banker, I've got a deposit on your bank. Can you give me a loan and collateralize the deposit?
Mm-hmm.
You could do that. You can bank with anything, right? Now, he's going to tell you how much interest you have to pay. And he's going to tell you when you're going to pay it back and how you're going to pay it back, right? And if things change, I don't know, the management of the bank changes, the regulators come in and say, bank, you're undercapitalized. They could call that note, right? And if you're not ready to pay that note off, they could seize your deposit. Now, who is in control of all that?
The banker.
Right. And this is exactly what we're talking about, the control of your banking function in your life. Right. You can bank with anything, but I digress a little. My point is, we're not talking about one policy. Nelson's talking about a system of policies. And why would you be talking about that? Because one policy will not accommodate your need for finance over your lifetime. You're young. You're going to earn more income in the future, right, than you are now. Well, where's that money going to go, right? Okay. Now, if your income goes up and you're more profitable, if you're in business, shouldn't you expand your banking system? Of course. Now, isn't that practicing honest banking? I mean, how many branches does your bank have?
Who knows?
Not the president.
Yeah.
Right. Not see. Well, why? It's more profitable. 7-Eleven, why don't they just build one more on top of another, right? Why do they build them all over the country? Why do they have more than one?
To take advantage of the business.
It's more profitable. A series or system of policies is more profitable as you accommodate your need for finance.
Yeah, I think Nelson even takes the example to the grocery store. If the grocery store is profitable, the business that you own where your stock and trade is groceries is profitable, then you open a second branch. And if your banking business is profitable, it makes sense to open another branch of it as well.
I don't want too many profits.
Yeah.
So does a policy owner have to wait 7, 20, 25 or more years to capitalize before taking out a policy loan? Of course not. You can borrow against a life insurance policy within the first year. And I know there are some companies that say you can't. Right? We can talk about that in the future. Okay. Of course not. You can borrow against a life insurance policy in the first year. No problem. Some companies you can borrow against the cash values within 45 days of a new policy. Right. So no, you don't have to wait.
Mm-hmm. And it is important to capitalize. Big theme throughout Nelson's whole book is don't be afraid to capitalize. The more you capitalize, the more financial value you'll have control over, the larger your cash values will be, the better off you will be. You should never be afraid to capitalize in the first place.
It reminds me, Nelson originally had 4 fundamentals. Right? Mm-hmm. Think long range. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to capitalize. don't steal, practice honest banking, and then don't do business with banks other than checking or saving. I mean, for lending, for financing large purchases. Yeah, it's pretty fundamental. It's pretty simple, and it works.
Yeah. And if you do think long range, you recognize the need to capitalize. Your income will go up. Your expenses will go up as you have a family of your own, as you want to purchase various things from houses, vacations, medications, whatever it may be. Your need for finance will increase. And so you'd want to capitalize a system that can handle the demands for that increased capital need. What stands out to you from part one of becoming your own banker?
I think it starts with imagination. And if you can expand your thinking, which is vitally important, you almost have to unlearn some things and then learn, right? I think you can recognize what's really going on in the big wide world of finance and money. And when you see the importance of banking in your life, in your personal economy, you'll clearly see that you need to become your own banker and to control that banking function. That's vitally important. I think that when you understand the characteristics of life insurance structured this way, beyond the basics of death benefit and premium, you'll see that you really can solve for your need for finance. There's some unlearning that has to be done and some learning that needs to be done, but it's easy, it's simple. There's a lot of people doing it across the country. And what it ultimately means is a peaceful, prosperous way of life, regardless of what the interest rates are or are not, none of which you can control. It's regardless of what the markets are doing or not doing. Mm-hmm. You can't control those either.
No.
I mean, it's real. Wow. I don't care what's going on. I'm in control of my personal economy. That's powerful.
Yeah. When we were preparing for this video, I went through and just counted the number of times that the word capital appears in becoming your own banker.
Because of his capital research.
In some form, yes, because of that research. And I counted 73 times. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. But capital is important, and that's what sticks out to me from part one. The example of the grocery store, the example of the bank, the emphasis on capitalization. At the end of the day, when people read the book, a lot of people have questions about capitalization, which we talked about earlier. And, a lot of people don't think about strategizing intentionally and explicitly for accumulating capital. And so they find themselves in a need to access that capital of the people who do have a strategy to build it. And that comes with the cost that we've, covered extensively in this first part and that Nelson reviews. So what I talk to a lot of clients about, what sticks out to me as I read Becoming Your Own Banker again and again, is the emphasis on capital, on the emphasis of the value of assets that's under your control, that you can use to acquire other things and to manage your life in a financially peaceful and prosperous way.
Capital control. Yeah, I think you did a good job there, wrapping it up. Is that all that you find important in the first part?
That's what sticks out.
Well, I'm glad you counted the word capital 73 times. Yeah. I'll take your word for it. I haven't, so I'm probably not going to take your math, but that's pretty intensive.
Yeah.
If you're talking about capital that many times in this part or this first section of the book, the man clearly understands capital. Mm-hmm.